Get ready for the Days of Thunder, a preview of the early days of Trump's second term. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Navigating the issues that matter to you. It's Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
T-minus 5 days. January 20th is Inauguration Day in the United States. That's when Donald Trump will begin his second term as U.S. president. We have a better idea today what could be coming our way. According to Steve Bannon, White House chief strategist during part of Trump's first term, the incoming administration is planning days of thunder. Bannon said the MAGA movement has had 4 years to get ready for this moment, and he predicts dozens of executive orders right out of the gate.
We refer to it right now as days of thunder. And I think the days of thunder, these days of thunder starting next week are just going to be incredibly, incredibly intense. I think you're going to see 50 executive orders. You're going to see a lot of legislation put forward. You're going to see the beginning of it today with Pete Hegseth. So this is going to be quite intense. It's going to be 10 to the 10th power more intense, I believe, than the shock and awe we did in 16 and 17, because remember, there's been 4 years of preparation here. You know, say what you will about Project 2025 and other projects like that at these other think tanks and other groups, but we spent years, people developing the policies, developing the executive orders, seeing the direction of where we want to take this movement.
Of interest to Canadians, given the threat of tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States, is what Bannon called the External Revenue Service. He said there is a belief in Trump's orbit that taxes on Americans are too high, and that those taxes could be lowered if there was more revenue from tariffs.
We have an Internal Revenue Service that was set up basically in 1913, right? When we, after the panic of 1906, 1907, one of the drivers I would love to see in executive orders is set up an External Revenue Service, that we wouldn't just look at tariffs, but because tariffs paid for everything up until the early 20th century. But you wouldn't just look at tariffs, you look at everything about how you can charge fees, essentially, whether that's on investment, whether that's on other things of access to this country. This is America's behind the golden door. Okay, and this market's the most robust, lucrative market in the world, and we shouldn't just let people have access. We shouldn't let foreigners have access to this market and to the American people and American citizens for free. So I think I would love to see something that set up an External Revenue Service in Treasury that eventually took the burden off people on Internal Revenue Service. There's no reason the American people, American corporations, even the donor class, has to pay for everything.
Shortly after that suggestion from Steve Bannon, Donald Trump announced on social media that he plans to do just that. He called America's current trade agreements soft and pathetically weak, and said he would create an external revenue service that will, quote, begin charging those that make money off of us with trade, and they will start paying, finally, their fair share, end quote. That's not music to Doug Ford's ears, the Premier of Ontario, or the Liberal government in Ottawa. Premier Ford had a meeting with the new Federal Minister of Finance, Dominic LeBlanc, yesterday in Toronto. Earlier in the week, Ford was very critical of the Ford government's new Public Safety Minister, David McGuinty, saying he's been nowhere on the file of border security. That's one of Trump's demands. Ford went on to suggest he didn't even know McGuinty, even though his brother Dalton was Premier of Ontario for 10 years. But after meeting with LeBlanc and seeing parts of the new border plan, Doug Ford now says he's impressed.
It's a fabulous plan. Let's get out there and tell the people of Canada they've worked hard on it. So what I said this morning after seeing the plan, it's a solid plan, and he's going to work, the Minister McGuinty will work hand in hand with people like Minister Kersner, our OPP, RCMP, CBSA, the U.S. Border Patrol, DEA. It's a collective, collaborative group that are going to secure our borders. But the numbers that I have seen, it's impressive, and the plan's impressive as well.
What's the plan? Get some specifics about what this plan involves.
I'll leave that up to the federal government. I'll leave that up to Minister McGuinty to get out there and put the plan in front of the Canadian people, but it's a solid plan. And if it wasn't a solid plan, I'd be saying it wasn't.
Premier Ford has said he's been told by staff in his government that 25% tariffs on Canadian exports could mean the loss of as many as 500,000 jobs just in Ontario. Dominic LeBlanc says his staff at the Federal Department of Finance is doing similar number crunching, and LeBlanc has been talking with the CEOs of Canada's big banks.
I had a chance to talk to the CEOs of the large banks over the last 24 hours. You can imagine that they're obviously doing a lot of that modeling. The Premier and I spoke about the real impacts that these tariffs would have to workers obviously in Ontario, but across the country. We're not going to speculate on what exactly are different scenarios. Next week, we think we'll know the precise details of what these tariffs will mean to the Canadian economy, and we'll be ready, of course, to respond from a position of strength, and we hope as a unified country. But it doesn't serve any purpose. I get that everybody is imagining complicated circumstances. We're very much on the job, and we're working together. And when we see the full extent of what the American proposal is, of course, we'll respond.
Then there's what's happening with Liberal Party politics. The Trudeau cabinet is going to be meeting over 2 days, including on Inauguration Day on Monday and then again on Tuesday. They'll talk about tariffs. And the threat of tariffs continues to wreak havoc on the political ambitions of those who had hoped to replace Justin Trudeau as Liberal leader. Dominic LeBlanc is not running in the Liberal leadership race. Melanie Joly is not running, both citing the threat of tariffs. And the latest to say similar things is the industry minister, François-Philippe Champagne.
There's only one person that I know who knows if they're going to be tariffed and what they're going to be, which is President Trump. Anyone else, I would say, is somehow guessing. There's only one that knows for certain what's going to happen. But let's remember, and that's why I was engaging with everyone in the House to say, imposing tariff is tough. Removing tariff is even tougher. So it is in everyone's best interest to work with us as we prevent and otherwise prepare. And that's the thing, you asked me about my decision before, and a lot of what I've decided is also that we need to prepare Canada. My job is to prevent, otherwise to prepare. And prepare is to make sure that we would have firepower to make sure that we can help industries that could be targeted specifically. And, that is what I'm doing now very much, is to make sure that we have the firepower to protect and defend our industries and our workers.
As for today's schedule, the big item on the agenda is a First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister and all of the premiers. Tariffs, the topic there, it's just underway. We expect more news out of that in about 3 hours or so. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
The Liberal leadership race is starting to take shape, and we have a better idea now who will be in and who is out, but who has the best shot. And is any of this helping the Liberals? Well, there's new polling about that today from Leger, and Andrew Enns is back, Vice President Tad Leger. Great to have you back.
Good to be back.
So let's start with kind of the big picture and the horse race. Conservatives, Liberals, and Democrats. How does that look right now?
Well, yeah, short answer, hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. We asked in this poll, we asked the ballot question actually 2 different ways. We kept Mr. Trudeau's name in because we asked our ballot question, if the election were held today, which of the following parties would you support? And we read the party leaders, and Mr. Trudeau is still the party leader today. So in that ballot, the Liberals are behind the Conservatives by 26 points. It's 47 to 21. Between Mr. Poilievre has 47% and the Liberals have 21%, NDP at 17. When we take the Prime Minister's name out of the ballot and we just have the parties, the race doesn't change much. The lead shrinks a little to 23%. So, there's a few people that, without the Prime Minister's name, and he's not an overly popular fellow these days, it helps a little. But still a very daunting task for those who are seeking the job of replacing the prime minister.
Okay, well, let's turn our attention to those people. So among the names we hear most often, Freeland, Carney, etc., who's in the lead?
Well, yes, so it's a moving target in terms of who's running and who's not running for the Liberal leadership. We actually had several names in our question that have since dropped out. Christy Clark and Francois Philippe Champagne and Anita Anand were three that were in our list in the weekend and have since said they're not. But among the big names who are still likely to get in, Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney, it's interesting. Amongst the general population of Canadians, our whole sample, Miss Freeland has a slight edge. 14%, of Canadians at large said that they'd prefer her, over 13% saying Mark Carney.
Okay.
But what's interesting, I think, Rob, is when we broke it down to those Liberals who are saying, those respondents to our survey who are saying they're going to vote Liberal. So I sort of, by extension, say, okay, well, they are probably maybe more likely to actually participate in actually choosing the next leader of the Liberal Party. The numbers change. Mark Carney comes out ahead at 27% among Liberal supporters versus Chrystia Freeland at 21%. So we see we're seeing sort of things starting to develop a bit.
Yeah. I was curious how many people or what percentage are saying, I don't know.
Well, that number's pretty high. That number starts to get up to, we're over, 46% of the general population said they don't know. And even amongst the Liberals, that number's same number, 40, gets up there pretty high. They're 30%. So there's a lot.
So it's like
of
1 in 3, even 1 in 3 Liberals don't know.
Yeah,
right?
A lot of movement, and that doesn't surprise me. First of all, just because you say into our poll that you're going to vote Liberal, a fraction of those, Rob, will actually participate and actually cast a ballot in that Liberal leadership. I mean, you have to take steps. You have to. I don't know what the process is. I'm sure you have to sign up as register yourself and.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a snapshot, but I will say that we polled several conservative leadership, when the conservative leadership process was going on over the last 4 to 5 years. They've done it twice, and that tracking of the supporters does give you a reasonable litmus test of what things are, how things are starting to shake out a little bit in terms of what you might expect when the actual day of the race comes.
The next Liberal leader could be in an election sooner rather than later. There's a very good chance that there could be an election in April, maybe early May. How do Canadians feel about that, a spring election?
Well, yeah, look, and I'll say this, regardless of how they feel about the government in charge, Canadians never are really excited about having an election. It's not. It may shock politicians, but it's really not something that that Canadians look forward to. And it's interesting, maybe a number of factors, but there's a bit more interest in an election. Coming up, 30%, just about 30% said that they'd like an election now. 29% said we should have one now. Another 30% said this spring. So you combine that, that's 60% of the voting population out there that says that they're interested in an election in the next couple of months. Another 30% said that they would be prepared to wait till October 2025, so later this fall. That's been a shift because we've asked similar questions in the past, and it's usually been a little under 50% that would have entertain an election in the next couple of months. So I think a combination of factors is leading people to want to get on with this exercise of refreshing, updating, changing our government, depending on point of view.
Okay. Very interesting. Look, I really appreciate the time. I thank you so much today, Andrew Enns. Great to hear from you.
Thanks, Rob. Always enjoy the conversation and look forward to a few more over the course of the year.
Indeed. Andrew Enns, Vice President at Leger. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know on News Radio.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
So again, the big event on the political news agenda in the nation's capital today is the First Minister's meeting, the Prime Minister and all the premiers meeting to talk about the tariff threat with Donald Trump's inauguration happening on Monday. So that meeting is underway now, and then in about 2.5 hours from now, we expect Prime Minister Trudeau to hold a news conference, and then one by one, the premiers will step out in front of the microphones and take questions from the news media as well to offer their own opinions on where things stand with 5 days to go until Trump begins his second term. There were some opening remarks ahead of this First Minister's meeting. Mr. Trudeau spoke today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, on energy and national security.
On energy and critical minerals, we all know in 2023, for example, the U.S. imported about $123 billion worth of energy into the U.S. It is an extraordinarily important relationship for them that powers their jobs, their industry, their homes. We need to continue that, and we can even do more on energy, as I know they want to. Critical minerals represent a key area of development as well, where we have the ingredients in the technological transformation of our economies that the Americans need. If they don't get them from Canada, they'll get them from China. And if they can't get them from Canada or China, they don't get them from anywhere. And that is going to be a real issue for them. So there's lots of opportunities for us to deepen that. We also are going to be talking about the joint defense of our continent, which obviously leans in heavily on Arctic sovereignty, where we have specific responsibilities and made significant investments.
Again, Prime Minister Trudeau, some opening remarks at the First Minister's meeting today, along with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who wants to hear more about the federal government's plan to respond if Trump puts those tariffs on Canadian exports.
We also need to learn more about where the government's retaliatory tariffs. I'm a strong believer in retaliatory tariffs. You can't let someone hit you over the head with a sledgehammer without hitting him back twice as hard, in my opinion. We're also eager to learn more about other considerations that we can hit back beyond the tariffs. And lastly, we need to hear from the federal government about how quickly and effectively the support comes to workers and businesses through the tariffs that we receive. It's absolutely critical we get it out to the people as quickly as possible.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford, he is the chair of what is known as the Council of the Federation, so he speaks on behalf of the premiers. He showed up at this meeting today wearing a ball cap, and it had the message on the front, "Canada is not for sale." So that's one story that we're watching, along with many that are in the mix today. Our Newsday panel is just ahead. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
On News Radio, the Newsday panel.
And the gang is assembled for today's Newsday panel. It features Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corps. Hi, Gary.
Good afternoon, Rob.
Cam Holmstrom is back with us, Principal at Nipaway Strategies. Hi, Cam. Good to hear from you today.
Oh, always glad to be here.
So let's talk about renewed hope for the Liberals. It is my impression, and my impression only, that there seems to be renewed hope for the Liberals, enthusiasm that Mark Carney, because of his appearance on the Daily Show and his performance during his interview with Jon Stewart, that this is someone who can really change the race and move the needle. and really help a moribund Liberal Party down in the dumps and down in the polls. Has Carney changed the race or moved the needle with his appearance on The Daily Show? What would you say, Gary?
Well, I'm not sure he's changed the needle by the one appearance alone. I think the fact that he's obviously planning to be on the race is what is changing the needle, and more than one potential Liberal leadership candidate, I think, is going, look, I can read the polls, I can read the how to raise money, and remember, it's not easy to get into these leadership races because corporate and union donations are banned, and individual contributions are limited to $1,750 per person per year. And so, if you want $350,000 fee to meet, you got to raise, got to find 350 people to give you $1,000. Like, it's not easy in this country to do it, and there's very few people who can do it. So I think that is the reality of the situation. I do have to laugh with my Liberal friends who are all apoplectic, weeks ago, and Doug Ford and Danielle Smith were going out and talking to Fox and other outlets to make the case for Canada, and how that was something outrageous. And now Mark Carney goes on the Daily Show to yuck it up with Jon Stewart. So I don't think it's the appearance. I think he did fine in his appearance. I wonder how many people in Canada are actually watching it, but I think it's the former rather than the latter, which is driving things for Mr. Carney.
Okay, very interesting. Is this any kind of game changer? Carney on the Daily Show. What do you think, Cam?
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here because it is just one appearance. But if Christy Clark last week reminded us of anything, one bad appearance can sink you right away. And honestly, if Mr. Carney had gone on there and basically performed like a lot of people thought he would, which was basically a clone of Michael Ignatieff, that could have been it right there, dead and done. So to me, that didn't happen. The bar was lowered, and he definitely rose above that, and I would say by then some. And you know what? What I liked about what it is he had to say, it made a very interesting contrast, talking about how he has dealt with crisis, working with conservatives and progressives alike in order to do it. It sets up a very interesting contrast for the moment that we're in, right? When we are dealing with crisis, dealing with our American neighbor, and actually trying to, try to pull together to make this work. I think it makes a very interesting pitch to the people. The one thing I put to this as well is that, Andrew Coyne had an interesting comment on this where he said, he wasn't Ignatieff, but he wasn't Trudeau. And it was said almost in a way that was kind of negative. I'm like, no, actually, to me, that's actually kind of a positive, right? He wasn't Ignatieff. He was better than Ignatieff, but he also wasn't Trudeau, because Trudeau tends to be vapid and tends to be all signalish and all that, whereas Carney was actually much more down to earth in what he was doing. Like, to me, that's that middle you want to kind of strike. I think he still needs to do better with it, but if that's where you're starting from, that actually could give you some hope that, okay, you know what? For their side, maybe not all is lost.
Okay, so apparently the announcement will be made by Mr. Carney in Edmonton tomorrow. In Edmonton. Now, you're the Alberta guy, Gary. What do you think about that? Carney goes to Edmonton.
I know Mr. Carney. He was born in the Northwest Territories, but lived a great deal of his life in Edmonton, went to the University of Alberta, and, like me, Mr. Carney is also a diehard Edmonton Oilers fan, so I cannot fault him for that at all.
Okay, all right.
Whether or not he decides to run in a riding in Edmonton is another question. I'm not sure that will happen. We'll find out, I guess, in the coming days, because there are probably safer seats in the country than running in Edmonton currently for the Liberal Party of Canada. But he's clearly trying to set himself up as, I'm not an Ottawa guy, I'm not a London guy, I'm not a World Economic Forum guy. Which he is all of those things.
Which he is all of those, yeah.
Which all of those things. But I'm also an Edmonton guy. I was born and raised here, and this is what, drives my thinking.
And the only reason I ever come to Ottawa is to skate on the Rideau Canal, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's talk about one of the other frontrunners. Chrystia Freeland, really, I think, did she set all this into motion I think she certainly hastened Mr. Trudeau's demise or departure by the way she left. But she left, and then she was kind of feted at the Liberal Christmas party, and nobody has seen or heard from her since. And it seems to me that's a mistake. She seemed to have all the momentum. She was being feted. And this is going to be a contest among Liberals, okay? And I just wonder if she has lost some momentum because of all of this. What do you think, Cam, on that, Krista Freeland?
You know what? I'm less concerned with that on her score, just for the fact that, there's always the old saying that, you can't really rise to the throne if you're the one who took out the king, right? And whether she deliberately did that or not, I don't think she really did, but I would argue there's enough people within the Liberal Party and in that caucus who believe she did, right? So to me, if you were doing that, then all of a sudden being right away prepared to go for a leadership campaign, that might just confirm some suspicions for some people, and I don't think that helps you win at the end of the day. So on that score, I'm actually, okay with it. But at the same time, time's a ticking here, right? Like the votes on March 9th, like you don't have 6 months. You've got only a couple of weeks to do this. And really, you had a couple of weeks starting at Christmas time to do this. So to me, if you're not at that point, then I don't know what it is you're doing. I don't know what it is you're waiting for in order to actually be able to jump in. Because, there's no time for...
Time is of the essence here. Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, very good point.
At the end of the day, you've got to be in. If you're in, you're in. You're out, you're out.
Well, I think everybody knows she's in, but my question is, where's she been? Okay, and I'll put that to Gary, but we have to stop here when we come back. I'm Rob Snow. It's our Newsday panel, and this is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now you know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
Here with Gary Keller and Cam Holmstrom, two of the best in politics in Ottawa. Great to have both of them on again today. Gary, I want your take on Krista Freeland, because she's really been nowhere since everything happened between her and Mr. Trudeau, and she walked out the door. And I just wonder if she has lost some of the momentum she may have had in this Liberal leadership race. What do you think?
Well, it's a good question. She's been awfully quiet as of late. And we also have heard her campaign say that she was going to make a statement by Monday. But it would seem very strange to me that you would make a statement on Monday when it is Inauguration Day in the United States, and we all know where the focus is going to be. So she may be wanting to let Mr. Carney do his thing tomorrow, on Thursday, and then maybe on Friday or Saturday launch her own campaign and make sure that she's got all her ducks in a row, T's crossed, I's dotted before she goes out and launches. A friend of mine...
And then you could be part of the story all weekend. They're talking about you on the Sunday political shows that, if people watch those.
A friend of mine from the Red Team, he thinks that there's a possibility that she doesn't run.
But she doesn't run.
That she doesn't run. So this is all lining up to be a coronation, and so that she would keep her powder dry. So I guess we'll see. But if she does run, I suspect they're making sure, like I say, all those T's are crossed, I's are dotted, and then launch with a bit of a shock and awe campaign.
And Gary, I actually agree with that last point, because we have to remember, as we found out through the whole thing that happened before Christmas, Carney and Freeland have a good personal relationship, right? Like he's a godfather to one of her kids, if I'm not mistaken. So I guarantee you that the idea of them running against each other isn't the most palatable thing to them in their personal relationship, and maybe they've kind of decided amongst themselves, you take the lead, I'll stand back.
Well, interesting. Okay. I want to talk, the First Minister's meeting is underway in Ottawa now, and Danielle Smith, the Alberta Premier, is accused of not playing nice in the sandbox. She has said, if you move ahead with something like an export tax on oil and gas from Alberta, that's a non-starter for us in Alberta. We'll try to find ways around it. It could cause a national unity crisis. If Ottawa leverages Alberta oil and gas in a trade war with the U.S. with something like an export tax, how seriously could that harm national unity? In your opinion, Gary, as our Alberta guy?
Oh, I think it would have massive, massive impacts. I mean, just look at how things like the proposed emissions cap has caused all sorts of consternation in Alberta. I think it would be a major driver of anti-Canadian, anti-central Canadian sentiment going forward. The problem that we have right now is that we have no central government. This is why we have premiers going off in all directions, and they are refusing to let the vacuum not be filled because it has direct harm to their constituents. And so when you have a vacuum at the national level, people are going to fill it, and that is an indictment of the failure of leadership from Justin Trudeau and the central Liberal government.
Cam, what do you think?
I agree with the second part that this is because we have a vacuum and it's not being properly filled. Where I have a problem with this, and I'm not unempathetic to the Alberta position, but I'm also empathetic to all the other provinces. To me, I'm at the point with this where everything has to be on the table, not because we want to do it or we desire to do it, because we might have to do it. And if you want to talk about a potential national unity crisis, what's it going to look like if Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, BC are being forced to have export taxes on their hydro to the U.S., but Alberta is somehow left exempt? Like, no matter what you do, someone's getting hurt at that point, and it's bad. So I'm not that I'm not empathetic to the Alberta position. When I hear the national unity piece thrown out, the only way to avoid that is for everyone to be in the same boat together dealing with it. And that does mean no carve-outs. Is that palatable? Is that nice? Is that what we want? No. But guess what? We don't want what we're facing. Like, this is what crisis is all about. We went through this with COVID just 4 years ago. You'd think that we'd be a little bit more used to the idea of, look, these aren't the options we want to face, but what do we have to do to get through this, to get us to the next point where we can do the things we would rather be doing?
Okay, when we come back on our Newsday panel, I'm going to ask our panelists this. What is the most likely scenario when the House resumes on March 24th? Is the government going to fall maybe just a couple of days later on a matter of confidence and we're into an election campaign? Is the new Liberal leader going to pull the plug and trigger an election themselves? Or does that new Liberal leader reach out to the NDP? They find common ground again, and maybe this government lasts a few more months. That's when we come back on our Newsday panel. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Back with Gary Keller, Vice President of Strategy Corps, Cam Holmstrom, Principal at Nipaway Strategies. It's our Newsday panel. I love playing this game. What happens next? What happens next? What is the most likely scenario? None of us knows, of course. But part of the fun of politics is speculation. Option number one, the government falls shortly after the House returns March 24th on a matter of confidence, maybe just days later. Option number two, behind door number two, the new Liberal leader, whoever that happens to be, just pulls the plug and triggers an election. Let's go. I'll seek a mandate myself. Or the Liberals and the NDP find common ground again. And maybe this government lasts a few more months. Maybe it lasts all the way till October. What is the most likely scenario? Cam Holmstrom.
Honestly, I'm still more of the scenario this doesn't get past March 26th. That's where I'm at.
March 26th. Wow. Okay.
The House will come back on the 24th. There'll be a throne speech, and there has to be a supply motion passed by the 26th to fund the government. Simple as that. There's going to be a confidence motion that gets to that point. So to me, it's either going to be the government brings in their throne speech, goes to that vote, and falls, or they bring in their throne speech and they just trigger it themselves. But I don't see it getting beyond that. My only caveat to all of that is that, is simply put, Monday, the rubber hits the road. All of a sudden we've been speculating, we've been hearing what that might happen. We'll start to know what it looks like, what it does, and how it reacts. And you know what? That could make for an extremely unpredictable 2 months between there and the return of Parliament and what that could do. And you know what? All bets are off depending on what happens there. Like, I'm not willing to play games on that because the stakes are just too high right now with what the Americans might be about to do to us.
Yeah, good point, Cam. Gary, what is the most likely scenario of the three that I have outlined for you?
Well, you've got your timing right about that, and Cam mentioned as well that week that the House comes back, there has to be a vote by sort of midweek of that week to fund the government's operations. Otherwise, the government runs out of money on April 1st, and the vote around that is a confidence motion. So I still think, again, that an election is, on the odds of it is more likely than not on March 26th. But I do think that whoever wins the Liberal leadership is probably going to want to have some time to try and govern. But the only way they can do that is, as you mentioned, they cut a deal with somebody. And I do not put it past a new Liberal leader to try to cut a deal with the NDP or somebody else, but most likely the NDP. And what does that look like? Could it be the offer of cabinet seats? I mean, there's all sorts of permutations and combinations on what that looks like. And so do I give that a 50% chance? No. But do I give it a 25% chance? Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at.
Under the scenario that Cam pointed out, if these tariffs come into effect and they're really hurting the Canadian economy, maybe there's a need for some kind of, stimulus package or aid package or something done with EI or something. Maybe there are overtures to the opposition parties.
You know what, Rob?
Right.
I released a piece on Monday talking about how this, if this is going to be the true crisis we believe it is, like a war type crisis, we need the parties to put the crap aside, form basically a national unity cabinet, small, focusing on just this and keeping the bills paid, and we can deal with the other stuff after. Because right now, our biggest weakness is that we don't have a parliament that's open and functioning and actually be able to respond in real time to what is about to be done to us.
Well, and it looks more and more like we're going to have a provincial election in Ontario sort of mid-March as well.
Right.
Because Doug Ford has said, if we're going to deal with this, I need a mandate, and we're starting to see the wheels move in terms of campaign readiness.
That's a convenient excuse for him, I suppose. Well. Yeah. Okay. All right. Very interesting. Thank you so much to both of you. Interesting times ahead, for sure. Starting on Monday.
Take care.
Gary Keller is Vice President of Strategy Corps. Cam Holmstrom is Principal at Nipa Way Strategies. And that means Talkback is coming up right after the news. The topic of the day, happy carbon tax rebate day. If you pay Justin Trudeau's carbon tax, and most of you do in the provinces where you're listening to this radio show, rebates are going out today. This happens 4 times a year. What if it's the last rebate you ever get because the carbon tax is killed? And what if it's not the Conservatives who kill the carbon tax, rather it's the Liberals who kill the carbon tax, hoping to save their political bacon? We're going to talk about the carbon tax coming up on Talkback right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day, and today's topic is the carbon tax. The carbon tax. It's Carbon Tax Rebate Day, or what the government calls the Canada Carbon Rebate. Money hitting your bank account today because you pay Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. And since this day only comes around 4 times a year, we thought it would be timely to talk about the carbon tax and the politics of the carbon tax, given the current political environment. But if you are listening in Alberta, the government says an average family of 4 in Alberta will collect $450 today, tax-free, through the Canada Carbon Rebate. If you're in Ontario, an average family of 4 there will qualify for $280 today. And if you're listening in Nova Scotia, an average family of 4 there will collect $206. And if you live in a rural area, there is a rural top-up, so your rebate is 20% more. So, cha-ching, everyone. Eat well tonight. Don't spend it all in one place. And, of course, the Liberals want you to know that it's Carbon Tax Rebate Day. I noticed Stephen Guilbeault on social media, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, encouraging you to check your bank accounts. And there is a picture of Mr. Guilbeault holding up a giant novelty check from the government of Canada, and he looks quite content with himself. But here's a question that we have for you today to kind of get the conversation going. This carbon tax has been one of the top environmental policies of the Justin Trudeau era. And the Justin Trudeau Liberals have defended it at every turn. Maybe with the notable exception of the carbon tax carve-out for Atlantic Canadians who use furnace oil to heat their homes. But, nevertheless, the Liberals insist, and they have always insisted, you are better off financially because you pay the carbon tax. Whatever you pay in carbon tax throughout the course of the year, you get all of that money back, and then some. This is actually a moneymaker for you. That's their claim. They've never backed down from that. But here is the question. Justin Trudeau's on the way out. Okay, he's announced his intention to resign as the Liberal Party leader and as Prime Minister of Canada. What if, imagine it, we all wake up one day and the new leader of the Liberal Party, the person who becomes the next Prime Minister of Canada, what if that person announces, I am axing the tax. I am scrapping the carbon tax. What if the Liberals axe the tax before the next election? What would be your reaction to that? How would you react to that? What would go through your mind? Would you say, for example, what a bunch of flip-floppers? What a bunch of flip-floppers. Would you say, what a bunch of hypocrites? Would you say, or would you think to yourself, well, that's a sign of desperation. They must really be desperate if they're backtracking on the carbon tax. Would you say, it's pure politics. It's about political survival. Just what would you say? Or would you say, that's a good decision? Good for them. They finally see the errors of their ways. And they finally understand that the carbon tax is not popular. It's hurting Canadians. And you know what? I'm not really thrilled anyway about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. And now that they've asked the tax and taken that off the table, I might actually give this new Liberal leader a look. I might even vote for the Liberals. Just what would your reaction be? If the Liberals axed the tax, what if the new Liberal leader scrapped the carbon tax? Really want to know what you would think of that. 1-833-668-2577. And one of the reasons I would really want to know this is because some Liberals, I would say they're sending signals that the new leader really needs to think about killing this carbon tax, that the carbon tax is killing the Liberals in the polls. And for the Liberals to have any chance in a pending election, which could be in just a few months from now, this tax has to go. It has to go. Canadians don't like it, and we did it, so Canadians don't like us. And if we're to have any hope in the next election, we have to axe the tax. For example, here's Kevin Lamoureux.
There's a lot of resistance.
No, just hold on. 15 years this guy's been a Liberal MP from Winnipeg. 15 years. And he has defended this carbon tax since it came into being in 2019. Kevin Lamoureux has been defending this carbon tax for 6 years. Well, until now, because this is what he said to the press gallery about a week ago about the future of the carbon tax.
There's a lot of resistance to the carbon tax. I think that at the very least, we need to, check with Canadians on that particular issue. And if there's a leadership candidate that's thinking about it, I'm not necessarily going to discourage it. I think that we have to put everything on the table. If we fail at demonstrating to Canadians that we cannot be that venue for change, we will not be in government come summertime.
And this is Liberal MP Cody Blois, who led the calls for that carbon tax carve-out in Atlantic Canada to win back Liberal support in Atlantic Canada. Hasn't worked. But just last week, he said as well, look, maybe it's time to get rid of the carbon tax.
Do you think the new leader should get rid of the consumer carbon price?
Look, I'm someone that fought very hard to actually get that price adjusted. I'm open to those different ideas. I think that there are certain constituents in my riding that would like to see that happen. There's others that actually really value the program, the fact that it has a rebate. My focus as a member of Parliament will be there's different ways to be able to go about fighting climate change, and if a leader wants to be able to change that, I would fully support it.
These are Liberal MPs speaking, that it's time to rethink the carbon tax, maybe even axe the tax. And there's a lot of speculation that the next leader of the Liberal Party, next Prime Minister of Canada, is going to do just that and axe the tax, because this is going to be a change election. And one of the things that has to change is the carbon tax. That's an anchor weighing down the Liberal Party, and they've got to cut the anchor. They've got to cut and run on the carbon tax. So what if the next Liberal leader did that? How would you react? I have a few more questions that I can ask you about the carbon tax, but we can get to those as we make our way through the day. What if the Liberals axed the carbon tax? What would you think of that? Call in line 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called us before, we would love to hear from you today. Just mention that to our call screener, and we'll make your call a priority. This is Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. It's News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Happy Carbon Tax Rebate Day, everyone. What if the next leader of the Liberal Party cancels the carbon tax? What if the Liberals axe the tax? What would be your reaction to that? A sign of desperation, a desperate flip-flop, or I think that's good. It's about time. I'm not crazy about the Conservatives, and this is a reason for me to give the Liberals a look. What would be your reaction if the Liberals axed the carbon tax before the next election? 1-833-668-2577. Scott in Kitchener. You're up first today, Scott. What's your opinion?
Rob, how are you today, sir?
Good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Excellent. I honestly can see it happening. The Liberals will float that idea to Canadians, and I think, honestly, there's a lot of Ontario people and just a lot of it's terrible, and I think they will gain a lot of votes back, and it terrifies me that they're gonna, and I can see them doing it in a heartbeat to try to stay in power. It's terrible. They need to go, man.
Okay, but you think they could do it, though?
Oh yeah, I don't doubt for a second that they'll try it.
Okay, and you think politically it would benefit them if they axe that carbon tax?
There's a lot of people that are just fringe, just on the fringe, and I think it's hitting them a little bit hard in the pocketbook. And I think if they're going to save a little bit of money, I think it'll be back to the same old garbage again.
All right,
they'll get
interesting.
The votes, and because they like. There's still a lot of Liberals around that like.
Oh, sure, yeah.
His some of his policies and stuff, whether they're full of crap. I can't understand how you can vote for that party anymore. The hypocrisy and the amount of corruption is staggering, and it doesn't matter if it's Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney. The party is a cancer.
Okay, gonna wrap it up there, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Scott thinks he wouldn't put it past them if they didn't, and you know what? Neither would I. And this is the thinking of a lot of people, that they're going to axe that tax because they know it's hurting them politically, and there's going to be a new leader. Michael in Cape Breton. Hi, Michael. What's your opinion today, Michael?
Yeah, Rob, an old saying my father used to tell me, the only way to get at the alligator is roll him over and get at the soft part of the belly. And I think that's what you're experiencing today. I think for sure if the Liberals ever, which they won't, be returned to Ottawa, I think they got to do a lot of time in the penalty box. But at the bank today and down at Tim Hortons and those places, you don't want to see the jolly good bunch. I said, what, is it Christmas again? Mm-hmm. And these were Tories that condemned the tax. These were Liberals that were down there trying to say, I told you so. And guess what, Todd? Sorry, Rob. Guess what, Rob? There's no difference between liberal and Tory, and they're capable of anything. They had
Right.
over 150 years to indoctrinate a bunch of stupid people. And I always had to say, Rob, anytime you see a group of stupid people meeting in large groups, beware. They know where they got the taxpayers right where they want them. They got the meeting out of their hands.
Okay.
And the Tories and the Liberals
So let me
are
ask
going
you,
around rejoicing today.
let me ask you, Michael, and then we'll tie things up. Do you think the Liberals could axe the tax?
Yeah, definitely. Without a heartbeat.
Definitely.
Remember,
Without-
you
okay.
said, oh, crap, the GST.
Sure. Do you think it will help them?
No, won't help them. They're finished
Won't
there
help
in
them.
America.
It's too late for them. Okay,
Ah,
interesting.
it's too
Thank
late.
you.
Way too late.
Thank you. It's too late. Okay. All right. From Cape Breton Island to Halifax, down with the causeway. Brent in Halifax. Hi, Brent.
Oh, hi there, Rob. First time calling, and
Appreciate
really
that.
enjoy your show.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
what if the
listen to it
Liberals
every day.
canceled the carbon tax?
They might. They might
Okay.
try and that would be a bribe, I think, at this point.
Be a bribe. Okay.
Mark Carney's a smart guy. He might. He's already floated a universal basic income as well. There's going to be some goodies offered, but I think Canadians now hurting so much with this carbon tax that I think they'll vote Conservatives anyway. But I think we're here because, Trudeau delivered on his promise. We should have asked as Canadians a long time ago, way back to 2014 and 2015, what post-nation state and post-nationalist policy was. Now we know what it is.
Okay. But you're saying you wouldn't be surprised if they canceled the tax.
Right.
The
but I
carbon
don't
tax.
think it'll
Okay.
work, to
Do
be
you
honest.
think it would help them, or are you like Michael? You think it might be too late for that?
No, I agree with Michael. It's not going to make the difference. It's not going to be, which surprises me as Mark Carney's a smart guy. It's quite a risk for him politically and in his career that he would take on this interim leadership, to be honest with you. But, I mean, that's his decision.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your call. We have lines available. 123 lines available. Wait won't be too long as we celebrate Carbon Tax Rebate Day by asking, what if it's the last carbon tax rebate today and the carbon tax is canceled and those rebates are no more? And it's not the Conservatives who cancel them. It's the Liberals, because the Liberals think it will help them win, or at least win more seats in the next election. 1-833-668-2577. Have your say on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
This carbon tax rebate today, the carbon tax is the topic of Talkback today. What if the Liberals axed the tax? There's going to be a new leader of the Liberal Party in advance of an election that could come as soon as late March or April. What if in advance of that election, that new Liberal leader axed the tax? What would your reaction be to that news? Let's ask David in Calgary. David, you're up next. What would you think, David, if the Liberals did that?
Well, I definitely think they will axe
You
the tax,
definitely think they will. Okay.
and it'll be Carney will be the leader. And as a result of that, they'll pick up an additional 20, 30 seats. The question I have for you, Rob, I would like some investigative journalism into what the bureaucracy and the machinery of administering this tax and the number of employees that are in place and what that's really costing Canadians. It doesn't come free.
Well, I can tell you exactly if you would like to know. Do you want to know?
I would love to, yeah.
Doesn't take much investigation. Sir, there's been ample reporting on this, right? Because it's a government program and there's costs to running this program because it takes government employees to run a government program, and the Canada Revenue Agency, and God bless everyone there, all 58,000 of you. It has been reported that the CRA has at least 461 employees working on the carbon tax. That was as of the year 2023. Maybe it's more now, given the way this government hires government workers. The cost, you asked, this is the answer. The cost to administer the carbon tax in 2023 was about $85 million for 1 year. And by the year 2030, total cost to administer the carbon tax, give out the rebates, will be $800 million. And between now and the year 2030, it is expected that administration costs of the carbon tax will be $500 million in administration. Government workers figuring out the carbon tax, at least 461 of them. You wanted to know?
Well,
now you know.
I'm glad you've got it at your fingertips. As an Albertan, the trickle-down cost and the impact on inflation of the carbon tax is completely underestimated. I'll continue to listen. Thank you for listening to me.
Let me ask you before you depart, please. If the Liberals do go ahead and cancel that, do you think it will help the Liberals if they do cancel the carbon tax?
It will, because there's too many people uninformed and will not carry the grudge that there should be.
All right, interesting. Thank you, David. Thank you. Robert, up next. You're on the air. Robert, what would you think if the Liberals canceled the carbon tax?
I'm not a supporter of the Liberals, I'll be honest with you, but anytime there is, a change of power, change of leadership, whatever, as we see with a lot of organizations, anything is possible, and I think it will happen, yes. The reason I'm actually even calling today as well, I appreciate your show, I love what you guys do. A little bit of a tidbit of information. I did get my $450 today. But I also woke up from gas prices being increased from yesterday of $142.9 to today $154.9.
Wow.
So so a 12-cent increase from yesterday to today. So I'm not sure what's happening in other parts of the country, but I just wanted to share that with you guys, that tidbit of information. So thank you for the money, but no thank you.
Thank you, but no thank you. Okay, very good. Yeah, I've noticed gas prices creeping up, and I did notice that spike in Calgary. I track the gas prices every day. $152.9 average price in Calgary. It's about $1.58 in this part of the country and in Kitchener, $1.58.9. And down in Halifax, about $1.63 a liter for regular. Back after the news on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We're talking about the carbon tax today and the politics of the carbon tax. And this idea, we wake up one day and the new leader of the Liberal Party, the person set to become the next Prime Minister of Canada, announces that's it for the carbon tax. We, the Liberals, are axing the tax. What would your reaction be to that news? What would be your reaction if the Liberals axed the tax? Not the Conservatives, but the Liberals. And they did it before the next election. 1-833-668-2577. That's our call-in line and a couple of lines available. Love to hear from you today, especially if you've never called before. Jennifer in Calgary. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
So, you know what? It would not surprise me at all if the Liberal government decides to cancel this tax. I do think that demonstrates the level of incompetence that they have and that they even know that this was wrong. I do believe that if this happens, that they're just going to bring it back. If they're elected again, they'll bring it back and they'll rebrand it. It will come back in a different way. I think a few of your previous callers were bang on just with regard to the trickle-down impact that this tax has had on us. When the cost to transport our food and goods increases, obviously the consumer is the one that's going to pay. And we're all seeing that and feeling that at the grocery stores.
Well, you know their line. You're better off because of the rebates, and you got your rebate today in Alberta, right? So,
well, you know what?
Biggest rebate in the country, by the way. Biggest rebate in the country. Family of four, $450. Average family of four.
Right. Yeah, well, I'll believe that when I see it. But I do find it ironic that this Stephen Guilbeault is taking pictures of himself with this fake check, because I think that is exactly what it is. And we should remember who he is. He's an activist. He illegally climbed the CN Tower. He doesn't care about the rules. He's also the same person that climbed onto the roof of our Alberta Premier way back, whenever that was, and he scared the life out of
Colleen. Ralph Klein.
Colleen Klein. She was the one that was home at the time. So you know what? When they do axe this tax, I really hope that Ontario and Quebec will kind of not fall for it and not vote this government back in, because that.
What do you think would happen? Do you think it would help them? Do you think it would help them?
I do think it might help them a little bit. I don't think it's going to help them enough. Okay. I would hope that it's not going to help them enough to make a big difference.
All right, interesting. Thank you for your call today. Good to hear from you. Wade in out in Sylvan Lake today. Hello, Wade.
Hey, Rob. I just don't really know how anybody could believe anything the Liberals say anymore. They've sold their integrity, and they shouldn't be allowed to buy it back. But what I'd like to let you know, and I don't know, I haven't heard you say anything, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has launched a lawsuit against the prorogation of Parliament. And there was a precedent set in the United Kingdom when Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament.
Prorogation will be over before that lawsuit ever ends. Let's stick to the topic here on the carbon tax, because it's carbon tax day. You're richer today, Wade in Sylvan Lake. You're richer today. You've got hundreds of dollars today from the government, courtesy of the government. Okay, it's going to be steak and craft beer for you today, my friend.
Well, I did go and buy a case of beer the other day, and they didn't charge me GST, so I said I saved $1.50, and I was like, all right, I'm voting Liberal.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you, if they did this, it's the Liberals who axed the tax. Do you think it would help them?
I think there would be enough gullible people in the East that would actually fall for that.
Just in the East, okay. All right.
That's what I think. So, no offense Wade. To you, Rob.
No, of course not. Sorry. No offense taken. I'm in Quebec. We don't even pay the carbon tax in Quebec. We have cap and trade in Quebec, which is kind of a carbon tax by another name. We're in this carbon market with the state of California, as a matter of fact, and it's obviously a very effective climate policy, cap and trade for the state of California. When you look at the state of things with Los Angeles right now and the terrible situation there. But on to other things. And our gas prices are just as high as they are anywhere in the country, even though somehow Quebecers have convinced themselves, hey, we don't even pay the carbon tax. Yeah, you do. It's just not called a carbon tax. Eric in Cole Harbour. Hi, Eric.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
Good to hear from you, Eric. Let's say you wake up, you're listening to the news there in Halifax, and it's the Liberals who have canceled the carbon tax. What would your reaction be to that?
Well, my reaction would be I didn't vote for them in 2015. I didn't vote for them in the last election, and I'm definitely not going to vote for them this election. That's my reaction. The carbon tax is insane, and I'm even more disgusted when you gave out those facts and figures to the gentleman about how much it costs to administer this. The carbon
$85 million a year, $85 million a year.
That's crazy. The carbon tax does nothing for us in terms of adapting to the climate situation we find ourselves in. I'm just going to leave it with this, Rob. There's a gentleman in California, I can't remember his name, but the caption on his podcast is, "The forest fires will continue until we do this." And he gives a very interesting dissertation on the CO2 in the air and what it actually does. And I suggest everybody read this. The carbon tax is doing nothing for us.
Right, but do you think it would? Do you think it would do anything for the Liberal Party? Atlantic Canada's been a stronghold for the Liberals.
I don't think it'll make them win the election. Here's my last thing, Rob.
Okay, all right.
What makes anybody think, if they asked it for the election, that they wouldn't come back within about 8 months and say, well, after deep introspection, we think for the good of the environment, we have to put this tax back on.
All right. Okay.
That's all I have.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for your call, and plenty of time to take more of your calls today as we talk about the future and the politics of the carbon tax at 1-833-668-2577. I'm Rob Snow. It's Now You Know, and it's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What would be your reaction if the new Liberal leader, in advance of an election, axed the tax and canceled the carbon tax? That's our question for today on Talkback. Dario in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Dario. You're on the line. Go ahead, Dario. What's your opinion?
Hi, Rob. This is kind of like a question that I have to ask. So let's say that this carbon tax is gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
My question is, it's been pondering in my head, is would the prices of food and gas and whatnot come down, or would people just keep it on, like keep the prices up? Like I really doubt that wouldn't make any difference in the day-to-day.
You don't think it'll make a difference? Why wouldn't it make a difference?
Because, like, let's say you charge $1 for an apple, and somehow you find a distributor or a farmer that sells it to you cheaper. Are you actually going to drop the price? No, you're going to keep making money, right? The more profit you make, the better. So
I guess it depends on how many Apple vendors there are. And what if there's an Apple vendor 2 blocks away who will drop the price because he wants more business, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But I really wonder if it's going to make any difference.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. A lot of people are asking themselves that. What if, for example, the premise of the question has always been, what if Pierre Poilievre axes the tax and prices don't go down? Will he have been proven wrong on just how inflationary the carbon tax is, for example?
And the other thing that I am a conservative voter. I'm just wondering, like, that's Poilievre's full platform, right? Like, he wants to act.
Well, no, it's not his whole platform.
Well,
it's a big part of his platform, certainly.
Yeah. So now if the Liberals decided to take it off the table, the carbon tax is actually a very clever move.
It would be.
What does Poilievre have to offer?
Well, that's the whole question for today. Would it be reason enough for a significant percentage of people who say they're going to vote Conservative right now because they think the Liberals are such a poor choice, or because they're angry about the carbon tax? Would it be reason enough for them to maybe rethink their vote?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm thinking about today.
And I mean,
I'm just thinking about what the consequences of a decision like that would be.
Yeah, it is a very clever move, and by the Liberals doing this, like, it's really sneaky.
Yeah, well, they haven't done it yet.
They'll do it.
There's
They'll do it.
There's some belief that they will do it because they know they're being hammered by it, and that if it's going to be a change election, one of the things that has to change is the carbon tax and the Liberals' position on the carbon tax. With a brand new leader, and that's one of the ways that they'll make the case that we are agents of change. All right, Dario, thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye. Bruce in Halifax up next. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Bruce. What if the Liberals axed the tax? What would be your reaction to that news?
Change. Do I got you there?
Yep, yeah, you have me now. Yeah, you did drop out, but if you could start your answer from the top, please.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, axing the tax. Just reminding me, what is the percentage of that carbon tax?
What do you mean, the percentage? What do you mean?
Well, the carbon tax, what does it impose upon the citizen in terms of a tax? How much is it?
Well, it's $80 a ton right now. Now, don't ask me how they measure a ton of CO2, but they have a way to do it.
Right. So, in your opinion, or based on what you know, how much does it add to the cost of living to Canadians?
I don't know what the exact figure is, sir.
Okay. I'm just wondering that because it's
the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada doesn't seem to think that it adds very much to the overall inflation rate, based on the studies that it has done.
I guess you considered it a question that's important enough to ask, right?
Yes. Right.
So to get people's opinions on it. And I guess whatever the end result is, I wonder if it's enough for any party to constitute the majority of the vote across the nation. And I wonder, I just don't know yet. Kind of, you know what you're going to get with Trudeau, right?
Right.
He's not going to make this big 180 turnaround and super promises should he even not have decided to step down. And just for the record, I think he stepped down. I think he should have stayed on until, with the intention of stepping down, until we got all this Trump stuff sorted. And then when that was done, have the legitimate leadership. And then the last comment, so I don't take up too much time, is that Polyev, he's PC. You know, they've ruled before. And I just wonder if he's going to be a man who has the confidence enough, the vision enough to sometimes make decisions in the opinion of what's best for the nation, where some people benefit and others don't.
Such as, sir? What do
I don't really know. You know, you can think back to Harper and across the nation. He made decisions, and some people liked it, and some people didn't. You know, leaders who are strong enough to make those big, bad decisions. Where some people,
like for example, Brian. Let's take Brian Mulroney for example.
There you go.
Right,
he did it.
PC Prime Minister who introduced the GST, another hated tax.
Listen,
people hated
Gary
the
Elliott
GST, and people still
wasn't a
hate
stronger man than him to stand up.
People still hated the GST, but Mr. Mulroney said it's not about it being popular; it's about what's good for the country.
Right, and so my only question is, I don't know if that's what. I think Polyev may be one of those leaders where he will make those decisions, and some people aren't going to like it. And I wonder what regions of the country are going to like it and what regions of the country are going to not. Because out here on the East Coast in Nova Scotia, we don't always have what everybody else does.
Right. Okay. Wandering a little off the topic, so I'm gonna bring it back here. But I do thank you for your call, Bruce, from Halifax today. We'll be right back. I'm Rob Snow. We're talking about the carbon tax, the politics of the carbon tax. It looms large. Certainly, Mr. Polyev wants an axe the tax election. You know that. And some liberals are openly talking about, hey, we got to rethink the carbon tax or we're going to all be out of jobs come summertime. Are they planting the seeds to actually axe the tax? And what would be your reaction if they did that? The liberals axe the tax. Your reaction? I'm Rob Snow. Now you know it's Talkback News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So, I mean, the Liberal leadership race is pretty much underway, and by March 9th, that party's going to have a new party. What if, and that person is going to become prime minister? What if that person cancels the carbon tax? What if the Liberals axe the tax? Because they know it's going to be a big issue in the election. 1-833-668-2577. What would be your reaction? Evan in Calgary. Up next, Evan. Thank you. Go ahead, Evan.
Hey, how are you doing, Rob?
Good, Evan. Thank you.
Good. Hey, I believe that, it might help the Liberals' cause a little bit in like the eastern provinces, but I don't see how people are seeing how it's not going to come back, because they want to raise it to 61 cents a liter, which is nuts because it'll double. So if that's the case, they're not going to drop it for long, and it'll be back. They're just going to have the vote. People are going to be like, oh, look, they're axing the tax, and then it'll come back, and then it'll be back even harder, I think, is what's going to happen, and we're going to be really hurt.
Okay. But you wouldn't be surprised if one day you wake up, you're listening to 660 News out there, and it's announced the carbon tax is being canceled by the Liberals. You wouldn't be surprised if they did that.
Well, their party is sinking pretty bad right now. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, but it's going to come back. And people who think it's not going to come back they're gullible because...
You think it'll come back in some other form if they manage to win the election?
Yes, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back harder and hurt us more as regular people. And just the spending has to go down. What drives inflation? Spending. Governments spend too much of our money, and we need to cut the spending. And so I agree with one of the other callers where he was saying that they need someone who can go in there, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, but we need someone like Trump in Canada who can just be like, no, we're going to run it efficiently like a business and not waste taxpayers' money, which is what's happening.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, conversation for another day. Again, government efficiency and a Doge committee in Canada. We've had some downsizing exercises before, most notably in the mid 90s. Sigmund in Calgary. Sigmund, up next. Hi, Sigmund. What if the Liberals canceled the carbon tax? What would be your reaction?
Isaac. Hi, Mr. Rob.
Yeah, hi
How
there.
are you?
Good, thank
Okay,
you. What would be your reaction?
They may cancel, they may not cancel. If you believe them, that's your problem. Do you believe that it is a few years, multiplied the few years when Mr. Chrétien was in power? Do you remember that? When he was
sure.
getting
I was
power.
around for that. Yeah.
What did he promise?
Well, he promised in during the 1993 election campaign to get rid of the GST.
Exactly. Did they?
We're all still paying the GST, right? Right.
Exactly. That's what.
So you don't think anybody is going to cancel the carbon tax?
They may cancel and they may bring back in different form, like you said.
Bring it back and call it something else. That's a popular opinion, Sigmund. Thank you for your call. We have to wrap it up. Right up against it here. But there's a whole other hour coming up right after the latest breaking news. Talkback continues here on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Cha-ching, it's carbon tax rebate day. What would your reaction be, though, if the Liberals axed the carbon tax under a new leader before the next election? Look, the frontrunners in the Liberal leadership race are Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland. It's going to come down to one of those two, and they both have issues. Chrystia Freeland's biggest handicap is that she was Justin Trudeau's partner in crime going all the way back to 2013. They were attached to the hip. She may have stuck it to Trudeau in the end and hastened his resignation, but she can't hide the fact that she defended everything, and I mean everything, that Justin Trudeau did for the last 12 years during his time as Liberal leader, and that includes the carbon tax. And Mark Carney is trying to portray himself as an outsider, but that's kind of laughable to me. He's no Ottawa outsider. I'm an outsider. An outsider is someone who calls the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister's office ignores their calls. See, that's someone like me. If Mark Carney calls the Prime Minister's office and says, I need to talk to the Prime Minister takes the call. He's not an outsider. And Paul Wells notes in his Substack, Mark Carney was hired by the Liberal Party just 4 months ago to do some report on economic policy for the Liberals. Nobody has ever seen the report. Nobody knows if he ever really did a report. But the Liberals at the time boasted about him joining the Liberals. He's not an outsider. Just look at his Twitter account. Bank of Canada, Bank of England, climate finance reformer, UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance. And he's godfather to Chrystia Freeland's children, one of her children. Sound like an outsider? Like I'm an outsider. David's an outsider. I hate to break that to you, Dave. You're not an insider. You're an outsider.
What?
Okay. Yeah. Like Tom in Cambridge, who calls us all the time, an outsider. Eric, who called us today in Cole Harbour, outsider. Hickey in Calgary, who called us yesterday, he's an outsider. Mark Carney, not an outsider. And when it comes to this question of the day, the carbon tax, and what would you think if the Liberals axed the tax and canceled the carbon tax before the next election? It's no secret that they're thinking about it and under a lot of pressure to do it. We've played Liberal MPs suggesting as much, clips of them from last week. But the internet is forever, as they say. And this was Mark Carney at COP26, big global gab fest on climate change. It was held that year in Glasgow, Scotland, and he was on CNN, praising carbon pricing as a wonderful public policy tool in the fight against climate change. Let's listen to this.
The other big, though, class of policies that are very effective are pricing carbon. And, it's much talked about. It covers, currently, carbon prices cover about 25% of emissions globally. That number is going up as China rolls out its so-called ETS carbon pricing scheme. But I'll give a good example, and I happen to be Canadian. I didn't have anything to do with this going into place. But in Canada, the price today is $30 a ton, but it's legislated to go up to $170 a ton by 2030. I know from conversations with Canadian businesses that basically they use the $170 a ton in their calculations for their investments today. The current price is interesting. The other one is decisive. And it's that sort of approach that can really drive investment, and combined with the capital that we've got on the table now through Glasgow can make the impact.
All right. That's good, Dave. Mark Carney 3 years ago calling carbon pricing carbon tax one of the best policies, one of the most powerful instruments in the fight against climate change. And he said later in that interview, it has to be $100 US a ton, which would be about $143 at today's exchange rate. And our carbon tax supposed to be $170 a ton by 2030. But what if Mark Carney did a total flip-flop, said, well, actually, the carbon tax, we don't need that? How would you react to that? Then there's Chrystia Freeland. I mean, who knows how many times she's defended the carbon tax in the last 6 years, but I can tell you, it's not hard to find sound bites of her defending the carbon tax. Here's one from 2 years ago.
Our government is absolutely confident that the price on pollution returns more money to the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. It is, and that there's just kind of common sense to that. This is a revenue neutral measure. The federal budget doesn't get a penny from the price on pollution.
I mean, you hear it's common sense, it's revenue neutral, most economically effective way to fight climate change, all of this stuff. I found those two clips after 5 minutes of Googling. What do you think the Conservatives are going to be able to dig up on Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland when they hire some 20-something to go through years and years and years of comments that those two have made about the carbon tax? The Conservatives are going to have material for 1,000 attack ads about what either of those candidates are going to say about the carbon tax. Just something to think about. But I'm telling you, whoever wins this Liberal leadership is going to be under immense pressure to axe that tax and get rid of the carbon tax. What if they did that ahead of the next election? 1-833-668-2577. Ryan in Halifax. Ryan, up next. Ryan, what's your opinion here?
Yeah, how you doing there, Rob?
Good.
Just a couple points here. The first thing that you mentioned, that Freeland and Carney, which they're going to be the front two runners there. Everyone just has to acknowledge that those are the two people vying for power. It's going to come down to one of those two. And those two have been side by side with Trudeau the whole time, Freeland more than Carney. But you're 100% correct. Everything that had to do with the carbon tax, she was the biggest cheerleader. And it wasn't just Freeland. It was every Liberal, and I watch a lot of House of Commons. I'm kind of a nerd that way. Anytime anybody had anything bad to say legitimately how much we were paying a carbon tax, what were people called? You're a climate denier. You want the planet to burn. You don't love children.
Don't take your kids on road trips. You want the planet to burn. Axe the tax.
Right?
Yeah, right.
So I'll give the Liberals credit. They were all drinking the Kool-Aid. They were all in message with that. So it was very clear contrast. Liberals want it. Conservatives and other people didn't want it. Now, what has changed? And 100% what has changed is that they could see the writing on the wall, and now it's time to ditch this. So the hypocrisy, like what people can see. I remember years ago, George Bush.
Do you think it would help them if they did? Do you think it would help them if they did?
If anyone, any voter, if they sat there and said, wow, it really changed, I was really on the fence, but now that they said that they're going to cancel it, I'm back on team Liberal. And it's funny, like there was a thing George Bush did before, and it was kind of a comedy. He said, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you. And then he went on and said, we just can't be fooled again. Well, we can't be fooled again because this would be the third kick at the cat of the Liberals. We know what we have. They have a record. We know where they're at. And anyone thinks, and I always find this in the last clip you did where Freeland saying it's revenue neutral. My question has always been, they say you're better off. You get more money put in. Well, where's that money? If everyone's putting in this money and we're getting more than we put in, does that make sense? Like Where's this pot of money?
How does that even make sense? Yeah. How does that even make sense? Yeah. Good point. Good point. All right. Gotta go. Tight on time here. That's my fault, not yours. Thank you for your comment. 1-833-668-2577. I think there's one line available there for you. You want to join the discussion? We're talking carbon tax and the politics of the carbon tax on Carbon Tax Rebate Day. Moolah in the bank account. It's a good day. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
What would your reaction be if the Liberals, under a new Liberal leader, axed the carbon tax? Let's go to Sid up next. What would your reaction be to that news, Sid? Thanks for calling.
Hey, Rob. Yeah. Personally, I think it's just another gimmick by the liberal government. Just like how they introduced no GST for the holidays. And what do Canadians save? $12, $15 a week. It's just another gimmick by the Liberals to win votes. And as soon as they get into power, hopefully they don't, they're going to reverse everything they did. I think Christina Freeloader and Mark Carbon Tax Carney are two heads of the same snake. And that snake is a boa constrictor that's going to squeeze every dollar out of every Canadian. The carbon tax is a joke to begin with. I mean, China is, permitting 2 new coal plants a week? Our neighbors to the south in the United States have no carbon tax. So why are Canadians the heroes of the world? Why are we paying for everybody else's carbon emissions when we're a country of 40 million people? And you have our neighbors to the south, they're 350 million people, 1 billion people in China. They have no carbon tax. China's not doing anything about it. And here comes the heroes of the world, which are Canadians, and we have to pay the price. And we're already taxed to no end. So, I think it's just another gimmick, another scheme by the Liberals to get into power. And as soon as they get into power...
Well, they haven't done it yet, but if they did, do you think it would help them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think it's way too far gone.
No, it's too late. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
all right.
It's done.
It's done. Okay, Sid, thank you. Some lines available there. 1-833-668-2577, hour number 2 of Talkback. Nera in Calgary as well today. Hi, Nera. Hope I'm saying that right. Hi there.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Let me just pull out on the side. Give me a sec.
I'll give you a sec. Yep. I have all the time in the world for you. Yeah.
I'm done. I don't want to.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have been there, probably. I was there when Joe Clark put 13 cents a gallon tax on gas. Trudeau won the election because of this gas tax. And what he did, within a year or so, he went 3 times more than what Joe Clark put it out. My thing is this, that whether Conservative comes in, first of all, to answer to your question, no, it won't help Liberals.
It won't help the Liberals. Okay. All right.
Because of their all other policies. Secondly, they will tax it, cut it, but whoever comes in power will bring it back in some other way, because as a population, Canadian population, we have become habitual of paying gas at certain price. May give a blink for about few days, and then back to this, maybe more. So,
okay.
I don't think it will help. I never voted against it, except the Liberals. And this time, I'm just going to may not go to vote.
You've always voted the Liberals, but this time you're not going to vote. Is that what you said?
Because
you're going to skip it. Okay.
Conservative, they are the same people, all the 3 colors. Only thing they change the color. They are
right. The same. Okay. All right. I thank you for your call. The cell phone is not great quality, but I do appreciate your call today. Thinking even the Liberals could axe the tax, the Conservatives could axe the tax, but he thinks Canadians are just kind of conditioned to paying for gasoline at a certain price, and it doesn't matter what party comes to power. If they get rid of the carbon tax, something else will come up that will replace the carbon tax. We shall see. I mean, if Pierre Poilievre ever backtracked on that promise to axe the tax, there would be hell to pay, quite frankly. He has so much political capital invested in that slogan. 1-833-668-2577. I'm Rob Snow. Join the discussion here, midweek edition of Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So we're talking about the politics of the carbon tax. It's carbon tax rebate day after all. And we've been asking, what if the Liberals' preemptive move ahead of an election with a new leader axed the tax, got rid of the carbon tax before the next election? How would you react to that news? And look, let me ask you, for those of you who are getting your rebates on the carbon tax, would you miss the rebates? Would you miss the money? I mean, 4 times a year, would you miss the money? I mean, David, you got your carbon tax rebate today.
Sure did. Yep.
How much was this?
It is $140.
$140 for a single guy in Ontario. $140.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what you're getting every 3 months, I guess.
Yeah, once a quarter.
Well, it would actually go up. It would actually go up in April because the carbon tax is going up in April.
Yeah, it'll go up a little bit in April. Yeah.
So, I mean, would you miss the money? Like, do you know in your head, like, oh, I'm going to get the carbon tax in my bank account that day?
Well,
would you
no.
miss the money?
Well, no, because,
no. Okay.
But I'm kind of weird that way, Rob. I like to plan to support myself and pay my bills with the money I earn rather than the money I get from the government. Right. So that's kind of my financial plan. So this is sort of money on top of that. I can tell you this, though, and I have been thinking about it. Would I rather get $140 every 3 months, or would I rather gas be 17 cents a liter every time I go to fill up? I'd rather gas was just cheaper and they didn't send me a check. That
maybe your food is cheaper.
Sure.
Maybe the food. Maybe the food is cheaper. Right. Some people wonder if the food would really be cheaper. And of course, there's a big argument going on in academic circles right now about that, and whether food prices would actually be lower without the carbon tax. It seems to be common sense to me that, okay, the farmer's paying the carbon tax, put it on a truck, the truck needs fuel, and that takes carbon tax, and that maybe that food stuff goes to a warehouse that needs to be heated, and maybe that uses natural gas, and they have to pay carbon tax on that, right? And there are all these trickle-down effects of this carbon tax. I've often wondered, like, how could it not impact, like, the price of food? But some people question whether it does actually impact the price of food, and by how much. And if the carbon tax is scrapped, will food prices actually be lower? I don't know. Well, I guess they'll have to measure that before and after if this carbon tax is ever actually scrapped. What we're asking today is, what if the Liberals scrapped it because they think it would help them politically? Eric in Halifax. You're up next, Eric. Hi there.
Hey, Rob, how are you doing this afternoon?
Good, Eric. Thanks. Go ahead. Yeah.
The carbon tax, eh? Well,
yeah.
I get $105, and it don't even buy me a decent groceries. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other. Okay. And I was, like I said to Andrea, the parties that starts with the letter L, they're doomed. I mean, you know, you don't want to be a party with the letter L in front of you, because that's just an accident waiting to happen.
It means loser right now, not liberal.
No, liberals.
Right? Yeah, I know. But L means loser now, I guess, is what you're saying.
That's true too,
but what if they canceled the tax? Do you think it would help them? If they scrap that tax?
It would help a bit, but
a bit.
9 years we put them in there, and we could put them out. So let's just call it an election, get it over with, because I'm getting fed up listening to it every day, watching it on TV. Call it an election, get it over with, let the people decide, and let the people suffer who they put in. They did it in the past. Let's do it again. And listen, Rob.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Okay.
You know, it's not going to happen until at the earliest by the end of March.
Okay. Well, that's good. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But listen, did you ever hear of a fellow by the name of Barry McGuire?
Barry McGuire. No, it doesn't ring a bell, Barry McGuire. No.
He's a singer.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay.
No, don't know him.
Okay. I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
No, don't say it. If you know you shouldn't say it, don't say it. Okay. We'll talk another day. Call me on Friday. Usually call me on Friday. We can talk then. Thank you. I'm just cutting that off at the pass. I didn't like where that could have been headed. Carbon tax. What if the Liberals canceled the carbon tax? What would be your reaction to that? This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Been talking about the carbon tax today because the Canada carbon rebate, your rebate on the carbon tax, that starts landing in bank accounts today. And there is some speculation that the Liberals are under such enormous political pressure right now that a new leader of the Liberal Party could actually cancel the carbon tax to kind of take that out of the equation as Poilievre goes all across the country and asks for an axe the tax election. Let's say the Liberals did that. What would be your reaction to that news? Would you say, well, that's desperation. It's just a desperate flip-flop. Or would you think, well, I'm not crazy about the Conservatives to begin with. This might be a reason for me to give the Liberals another look. What would be your reaction? 1-833-668-2577. We have some lines available. We won't be too long. It's Talkback here on News Radio with Peter in Langley, British Columbia. Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Hi,
yes, your question, it would not change anything for me if they axed the tax.
Okay.
The reason for that is because they're just going to put in another tax, change the name, whatever, and put in the same scheme if we were to elect them. I think that Canada cannot afford this carbon tax right now. We're heading into a pretty bad political time. Yeah. And I agree with, I think the guy's name was Dave, your guy there. He said that I would rather they left the money in my pocket and I'll decide how I'm going to spend it. Getting this rebate back, that's ridiculous. Let me keep the money and I'll decide, how to spend it. The problem
now, in British Columbia, where you are, I should note, you don't pay Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. You pay the British Columbia carbon tax, but it more or less works the same way, and there are rebates on the British Columbia carbon tax as well.
Didn't know that. But the problem with the carbon tax, I agree that we need to do our part to try and clean up the environment because we're all headed downhill. But we can't do it by ourselves. When you've got the Americans that are just going to do whatever the hell that they want, how can we afford to be penalized with this when we're trying to compete with them? Now, the last thing that I'd like to say about that is I think what they did wrong with the carbon tax is, the carbon tax in itself is that it's just a slush fund. Like here in BC, they use the carbon tax to prop up the budget. And I think what the better thing would be is to take the royalties, all the royalties from fossil fuels, and put that into clean energy projects. How about putting in fueling stations or clean energy stations across the
electric car charging
highway
stations and stuff like that? Electric car charging stations? Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, sure. Sure,
and now we see the money, the money that's coming from fossil fuel production, now it's going to help us, change over to either electricity or hydrogen or whatever kind of thing. But I think right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think right now all that carbon tax is just a big slush fund. Do you know about that?
Well, I know about the Green Slush Fund, but that's kind of a different pool of money called SDTC, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and that's the thing that paralyzed Parliament for months and months and months on end.
Yeah.
Because that's a fund that's been around forever, predates the carbon tax, and it's kind of like a venture capital fund and is supposed to invest in green technology startups. And the problem with that is that you had people on the board directing money into companies in which they had a financial stake, which is a total conflict of interest, like 185 conflicts of interest. It was so they haven't even begun to investigate that. They tried their best, but they were stymied. The Parliament, it was the Bloc, the New Democrats, and the Conservatives. It wasn't just a conservative opposition thing. It was all the parties said, we want to see all the documents related to this. You have to table them in Parliament. We want to see this, and we're going to give them to the RCMP, and that led to the paralysis in that whole thing. It's so smelly, Lord. That whole thing, SDTC, that even the Liberals shut it down. They shut it down.
Well, I would say that, given what's going on with all the slush funds and the event that you just mentioned there, I really think that people should not vote the Liberals back in, because we got to make them pay.
Gotcha. Okay. We put them in the penalty box. Fair enough. Thank you, Peter. Okay. Good to hear from you. I appreciate your call today. This is how the Liberals have always defended the carbon tax: is that it's painless. And you are supposed to notice that on days like today, like David is getting his check for $140. And the claim is, David, you're no worse off because you pay the carbon tax. That $140 has made you whole, David. Is that how you feel today, Dave? You've been made whole?
It doesn't feel that way.
By the carbon tax? You might even be better off, Dave.
I'm not feeling better off. No.
You don't feel better off?
No.
Maybe it's just the weather. Maybe it's just the winter doldrums. And they have their averages that they use to highlight this. In Alberta, like $450 for a family of four in the carbon tax rebate today. $450. Imagine if Ontario, $280 for a family of four. This is all the average, beautiful middle-class family in Canada. Okay, it's all averages. It depends on household income, how much you make, all of this stuff. Some make less, some make more, some get none at all if they make too much money in a carbon tax rebate. And in Nova Scotia, $206. And it's every 3 months. And if you live in a rural area, there's a top-up. So the rebate is 20% more. Because, some rural people use propane, for example, or they drive more because there's no public transit, so they get a carbon tax top-up. And, it's a lot of money. It's in Alberta, for example, for the year, $1,800. Tax-free. This is not taxable income. And one of the things I'll never forget, remember the government went through this whole rebranding exercise, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Because this used to be called the Climate Action Incentive. And apparently this money would show up and nobody really knew what the heck it was. More money from the government. And they didn't actually know what the payments were for. And the government wanted to get some credit for the money that they're sending. So they changed the name to the Canada Carbon Rebate, and they forced the banks to make sure they call it that on your bank statement. Did you happen to notice, Dave, when you logged on, did it actually say Canada Carbon Rebate when you logged on to your bank?
Yeah, that changed.
It did say that.
That happened, a few months ago, but I did notice it at the time, and it says right there, Canada Carbon Rebate.
Right, because the government wants credit, after all, for giving you your money back. $1,800 for that family in Alberta. $1,120 for a family in Ontario for the year. $824 tax-free for that family of four in Nova Scotia. And times are tough and money is tight. Right? But what if the carbon tax goes away and those rebates go away as well? Maybe this is the last Canada Carbon Rebate anyone collects, given the politics of the day. I'm Rob Snow, back with more of your calls here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We have been asking today on Talkback your reaction. How would you react if the Liberals, not the Conservatives, the Liberals under a new Liberal leader axed the carbon tax before the next election because they think it would help them politically? in that election. Holly Jean in Calgary. Hi, Holly Jean.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
So
what would be your reaction?
I may be going from some false information, but first of all, if the carbon tax is going to remain, it should be a consistent dollar amount across the country. I think there's different rates in different provinces. The other thing, instead of keeping the carbon tax and giving these rebates, why would they not reduce the amount of the carbon tax so we don't have to put it out front and hopefully get something back? Those are my two thoughts.
Okay, what would you say if the Liberals just said, you know what, the carbon tax is gone and the whole rebate thing is gone? We're done with the carbon tax.
That would be all right, except that the money that they're spending on that carbon tax right now should go into developing more economic or better means of producing energy, like thermal power or nuclear power or something, rather than not finding a solution to that.
Right. Well, as I said to a previous caller, it's the administration cost is $85 million a year for the carbon tax.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
If I wonder if you stopped 100 people in the street and said, the government just found $85 million, what do you think it should spend it on? What do you think people would say?
Well, I hope they would say it's finding reasons to reduce the carbon emissions.
Well, I don't even think it would have anything to do with the environment. I would think it would be, well, we could use some affordable housing. We could use some better health care. Maybe we'll hire some nurses and doctors and stuff like that, I think.
Either of those options would be wonderful.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your opinion. Right. Yeah, again, just to run these figures, I did this for a previous caller who said, how much is it costing to administer the carbon tax every year? $85 million a year as of 2023. And now it's January of 2025. Last reported, this was all through requests from opposition parties, the Conservatives, asking for information on the administration of the carbon tax. 461 government employees administering the carbon tax at a cost of $85 million a year. Now, remember, this thing came in 2019, and the estimate is between 2019 and 2030, the total cost, government administration costs for the carbon tax will be about $800 million, just shy of $800 million. And between the period of 2024 and 2030, so those 6 years, the administration costs about $500 million. Can you imagine? Just kind of government busy work and paperwork, administering a tax, administration costs, government workers collecting the tax and issuing rebates. And those rebates hit bank accounts today. First payment of the year, first rebate of the year on the carbon tax. And you know what? You never know. It could be the last carbon tax rebate of the year, just given the politics of the carbon tax, a looming election. And it's not out of the question. It could be a new Liberal leader who kills it. What if the Liberals killed the carbon tax? I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
I do thank you for all of your calls today and all your interest in that topic of the carbon tax. And I guess more generally speaking, just climate change policy, just given the current domestic political situation. And speaking of that, with the Trump inauguration on Monday, there's a First Minister's meeting that's happening in Ottawa today. It started about, almost 3 hours ago now, and supposed to last about 3 hours. So in about 5-6 minutes from now, these things could run longer, of course. There is expected to be news conferences featuring Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and various premiers. They'll be taking questions from the news media as well, and it will be interesting to see what the premiers have to say after this First Minister's meeting. So there'll be lots of news on Canada's response to Trump and the threat of tariffs throughout the day. So, keep it right here. We will keep you right up to date. On the carbon tax, I mean, politically speaking, you just have to think of what a new Liberal leader is facing. The winner of the leadership race is going to be announced on March 9th. And then 3 weeks later, the House of Commons will be back in session. And all of the political parties, at least right now, including the NDP, are saying it doesn't matter who the next Liberal leader is. We're going to defeat the government on a matter of confidence, and that would thrust Canadians into an election campaign. 8 days after the House returns, the carbon tax goes up again. April 1st, the carbon tax goes up again. The carbon tax right now is $80 a ton. It's going up to $95 a ton, an increase of 18.75%. And yes, I know the rebates are going up too. And they're going up by about the same percentage, 18, 19%, depending on where you live. But between March 25th, 26th, and April 1st, there is a very good chance that this government is going to be defeated on a matter of confidence, and the election campaign will be underway. And is already, we all know, everybody can look at the polls and the way the polls have been for the last year or so. It's already going to be tough for a new Liberal leader, just given the track record of the Liberal government. And the last thing I would think a new Liberal leader would want to do, with the cost of living still a major issue in this country, last thing that person will want to do is fight an election campaign having just raised taxes, a hated tax, a tax that Canadians have soured on, no matter what the government claims about rebates. So the pressure is now on that new Liberal leader, whether it's Carney or Freeland or someone else, to axe the tax. And the other thing is, and I'm using air quotes here, change. That the ballot question is going to be change. That this is going to be a change election. Canadians are sick of this government for many reasons, and the carbon tax is just one of them. They're tired of the Liberals. They're totally done with Trudeau. Housing and homelessness, inflation, cost of living, immigration, all of this stuff to deal with. And Canadians think a new government should have a shot at trying to fix some of this stuff. Completely natural in politics, especially for a government that's been in power for 9 years. But the ballot question is going to be change. And the Liberals are going to say, with their new leader, hey, look, we've changed. No more Justin Trudeau. And that's a big change. He's gone. You don't have to worry about that guy anymore. We have a new leader now. And her name is Chrystia Freeland, or his name is Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland, kind of hard to make the case that that's changed. Mark Carney, a little bit easier to say we've changed, but not much. But if it's a change election, then the Liberals are going to say, well, we have to change some of our policies. And a big one, but not the only one, is going to have to be the carbon tax. And I am positive that the Liberals have been having these discussions among themselves, and they have been asking themselves, how do we give up and flip-flop on one of our signature environmental policies that we have defended from coast to coast to coast for the better part of 6 years, because now people don't like it? How do we get rid of that carbon tax and try to start winning back some of the voters who have abandoned us? And now we have Liberals, MPs, no less, talking about it, talking with news reporters on camera. It's a change election. And one of the things we need to change is our defense of the carbon tax. Because if we don't, we have no hope of winning a change election, especially if we just raise the carbon tax. So they're going to try and figure out a way to explain that to people. It's kind of the working assumption right now. Again, stay tuned for news out of this First Ministers meeting. Latest breaking news coming up next. Talkback returns tomorrow. This is News Radio.